I'm Vic. Welcome back to Anderson Street. We are talking about oppression today. Quite the umbrella topic. It's good, it's gritty, it gets intense. I got some dope homies at the table, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as we like talking about it. At what point do you tell people this is how you refer to yourself?
It really depends on like the context of like what's about to go down. So I wanted to make sure he misgendered me in the beginning of this. I wanted to make sure that he knows my pronouns so he can consistently use them, and everyone who's going to be at the table talking is here and present and hears me correcting him. So I just say I don't use she her pronouns. So okay. I just be like, just say my name.
My name's Karess Taylor Hughes. I'm gender non-conforming, so I use they, them pronouns. I live in Manhattan. I work in Brooklyn at Brooklyn Community Bail Fund.
If people don't understand how to use they, them pronouns, then I just say, just say my name. So instead of like, Karess wanted this, or Karess, or instead of like, she wanted the apple pie, you say Karess wanted the apple pie.
What about a stranger? So like, the polite thing to say from if I was working in,
I'd say don't call me ma'am.
Like, excuse me, miss?
Yeah, I'd say don't call me miss,
okay.
And then we'd go forward with the conversation.
Okay.
How do you think people react to
the reaction?
I'm assuming people react to it.
Some people, some people are just like, okay, and they keep it moving. Mm-hmm. Sometimes like people don't agree with it and they just scuff off at it, but like if it's just an exchange, people don't really give it too much time. Yeah. If people do decide to give it time, then I'll just like smile and be like, I said don't call me that, so don't call me that, and then that'll be the end of the exchange. Yeah. And if they keep going, they keep going.
Well, what if they've like, there is that moment though of someone was just taught something in the moment by someone else, and then the next time they referred you, they may have just forgotten that.
So then I just correct them.
Okay, my
issue, I don't have any problem correcting people. My issue is when people try to give me pushback on saying what I am and what I need to be referred to.
So if someone's like, oh shit, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
you're like, hey, it's fine.
Yeah.
Because like,
you don't even have to necessarily apologize. You should apologize, but if you correct yourself in the moment, if you're like she and I'm like they and you're like they.
Okay.
Well, what about if someone's like, they really just don't know, so I'll say she, you say they, and then is anybody ever like, what? Like
that, right. I mean, that happens. Yeah. I would just say, just use my name. Just you don't have to say she.
Let's not even go down this way.
I'm registering it in my mind as we speak.
You probably have to have that conversation like 1,000,000 times a day.
Yeah.
So like, at what point does like your like belief for like your identification like that just seems like really inconvenient?
It's my identification
I'm just sick
every
of having
day.
the conversation.
Well, every day you have to tell people your name, and some people's names are harder to pronounce than others. But every day you put in that effort to say who you are, because that's who you are.
That's a good example.
Every day is frustrating. Every day is frustrating. Every day is frustrating. But that's part of being me and living my true self.
Totally. But like I'm thinking about like, I mean, yeah, you definitely use your name because it's like your name and you can respond to your name or whatever. But like if you're doing anything like of courtesy, like of common nature, like going to like the grocery store and like somebody's like, excuse me, miss, like do you have blah 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 or whatever, like that seems like an appropriate
They would say excuse
thing.
me, miss, to me.
Yeah, like if
I'm at the grocery store.
Yeah, if you're working at the grocery store, like I hope you have a nice day, ma'am, or whatever.
Well,
like if you're
I'm not
out.
in those type of. I don't work in those spaces. I usually work in like office spaces where like everybody in my office. It's not even on my profile, on my bio at my job, like what my stuff is. I have clients all the time who misgender me, and I just say, please don't call me ma'am or please don't call me miss. Mm-hmm. And they don't know the difference. They're on the end of like another phone line, right? So they're just like, okay, I made an assumption based on this person's voice, but might not be who they are. And so when I'm talking to people about in person, it's like, oh, you just made an assumption about my gender just by the way that I look, but that might not be who I am.
Yes. Well, you can understand historically like why that is, of course. So do you give people a bit of pause to understand that like this is a massive transitionary moment for people to understand that gender is not two things?
I mean, yes and no, right? So I could give them the grace, but like it's also just I could give them like the grace and be understanding, but then how much of that am I sacrificing in that moment where it's like I just told this person something and they're like fighting against it. Yeah, and it's just like that really isn't really necessarily them not understanding gender, is them being resistant to new information.
Yeah,
fine, that's different.
Yeah, and this is something that's like how many people actually are when they do ask you like what does that mean, are asking because they're interested in learning more about it versus like, well, I don't understand that, and it doesn't
ring true in my experience of life.
Yeah. I mean, for people who, there's always an opportunity where like I could walk away. The only times that I'm not able to do that is when I'm under arrest, right? Which it has been a situation where I was arrested, and the group that I was arrested with was constantly like correcting the officers so that I didn't have to put in that labor and was saying, Karess uses they, Karess uses them, and no matter how much the police officers said I don't give a fuck or I don't give a damn, they always corrected them, so I didn't have to put in that labor. So the way that like genderphobia and transphobia works isn't just like the person who's like combating you in that moment, is how other people step up around you.
Every day I'm making a decision on whether or not I'm going to go further and educate this person or I'm going to move along. Some days it's worth it more than others. Some days I have the capacity to do it. Some days I don't. Being an oppressed person, like my capacity varies day to day, depending on the types of oppression I experience that day.
A way of normalizing this that I'd seen for the first ever time was the recruiter had sent me an email, and underneath her signature, it said she, her, hers. And I'd never seen that. Let me not say of course. I know-ish about this world. I am not as well educated as I could be, so I know that I can make mistakes due to ignorance. But seeing that, I thought, what an excellent way to start to normalize something that people just don't get, so that it makes you think, oh, this is so important to some people that it is their identity. Like, I don't even think about my identity as a female. I'm not gonna say, I don't know, I'm a woman, I'm an American, I'm from New York, like that's right. Yeah. How I look and how people have judged how I look is also how I want to portray myself as a woman. So like, you're right, I never had to think about it. I just wanted to toss that point out. I don't have a question.
I mean, I'll jump in there because I actually went on a job search and I saw something very similar. It was the first time that I'd ever seen that. And like, I'm thinking at it from like the perspective of like being like a 13-year-old kid and growing up. And like when I was 13 and growing up, like I wasn't thinking about what I identify as or what my gender was. I was just living my life in the way like I feel. And so I feel like presenting an option that could be like an other to some kid who's going through puberty and life is already enough confusing with hormones changing, to present them another option that they have to then choose an identification is almost like even more confusing than just like letting him live his life.
Is it? Or is that letting him live his life and understanding that there's more than just these two options, that like your gender is fluid and you can grow up to be whoever or however you feel you are?
I mean, I think innately, like if a parent was to lay out like my niece, she's 2 years old and she's very much like a girl. Like it's very like apparent. She like wears princess dresses and loves them. It's not because she's surrounded by it, but like if I presented her like a blue football, a yellow, you know, whatever else it is, and like a pink princess dress, she would like, she's generally like drawn to the pink princess.
Does she have any other dresses? Does she have military clothes?
She does.
Does she have superhero clothes? Does she have like these other options, right?
Or
has her parents always just like been like, hey, you could do this? It's also, kids have social norms just like we have social norms. If all the cool girls in class are wearing the princess dresses, I'm gonna want to wear a princess dress too. If I know that I'm gonna go to school and I'm gonna be made fun of because I have a Spider-Man outfit on, I'm not gonna wear a Spider-Man outfit.
Even if that's the one that you want to be wearing.
Sure. I mean, I don't know where the conversation can like end. It's not that it's ending.
Yeah, no,
here,
it's
like,
just
I'm thinking
how
like,
it is.
Like kids are like, as kids are going to be kids, right? And like they're going to be attracted to things they're attracted because like kids live their life in the most like present moment possible, and they just go from moment to moment just by like feeling. And so like you're right. If like kids, if a girl goes to school and like other girls are wearing princess dresses, she's going to wear a princess dress and not like a Spider-Man costume. So like presenting the option of other, I still don't really necessarily like understand like the benefit of it.
I don't even know if it's presenting the option, right? It's just like,
it just seems more confusing.
Hopefully going into a world where if someone doesn't feel like they're like, if I didn't feel like I was a woman or identified as a woman, just knowing that there would be an option, or like that there, you know, like
that I'm not so different, that I'm completely by myself and closet and clandestine. That there's a supportive group here that understands I'm something else.
It's not to confuse the masses, I think. Of like,
it's just to, I guess, identify your own self.
Yeah, like, or just to be like, okay, well, I don't identify as a woman, or like as a girl if I'm like 12, or like
or
something's
girly.
off.
I don't really identify with, I don't want to play with these toys necessarily. I want to play with these toys, but I know I'm going to be made fun of by playing with these toys. But what if we normalized it where like they're toys. Toys aren't gendered. They're just toys. Yeah, kids can play with any toys that they want to.
Sure.
Yeah. But we've normalized this where it's like girls can only play with these toys. Boys can only play with these toys. What's so wrong with saying whoever can play with whatever? Is that confusing for a child, or does that give that the child like this freedom to know I don't have to have anxiety about playing with whatever toys that I want. Or when you take a child into a store and be like, you can shop whatever side that you want to shop on. Is that confusing?
But I think society set that up regardless of anything.
Yes.
So the underlying factor is where you're growing up, who you're growing up around. That's society. So there's stuff for the boys, there's stuff for the girls. If your child was to grow up, boy, let's just say for instance, playing with a doll, there's some families that's going to frown upon that. Hey,
Of course.
you're not supposed
Take the
to
doll away.
take the doll away.
Yeah.
They'll do that.
Yeah.
You know? At the end of the day, like, you know, I'm learning sitting at the table just from you saying that. Like, I have to take that in, and like you said, it's confusing to the masses. Like, I'm sitting here really quiet, like, man, I got
Like,
so
soaking
in this moment, you know?
Yeah.
Because I want to be for anybody else that's sitting and watching this. It's like, damn, you know what? I was confused, but I'm glad he spoke up, because it is like that. But I don't think for a child there should be set any boundaries given. Yes, they should be given the opportunity to go and explore. Some things, you know, might have to be set with limit or with understanding. But there's many people that don't teach in that aspect. So,
But that's the thing. That's what we're pushing for now is for like, you know, you have school teachers who know how to handle these situations and know how to give these kids these options.
Correct.
I know growing up, like our teachers for like the holidays and things gave us like explicitly like boys got action figures, girls got dolls. Whereas like now they just bring a basket and kids get to choose whatever they
Right.
want.
gotcha.
Right? So it's just like
simple thing
pushing.
I think that's great, and I think like
that
innately,
is.
like a kid will be like, whether they're a girl or boy, will automatically go to an action figure or go to a doll.
For sure.
And I think like it could be confusing, like presenting like just another option. It's like it's like presenting like something where they should be thinking like who they are, like not linearly, but like who they are in the moment, just like what they're reacting to, and then presenting them like letting them know like there's another thing out there that you could be, and not letting them just like be. I'm not trying to. This is strictly.
I think we hear you, but like also there, and I made this example a day before in Asia, you know, where there's a multitude of cultures and religious conformity and so on, but like lady boys in Thailand or transgender, and there's a population there, and okay, it's not acceptable by every Southeast Asian culture there, but in Thailand, these ladyboys, no, I mean, I sat there and listened to these ladyboys talk about their experiences, and they knew always before they were 5. Yeah. And like, just biologically, if your personality is set by the time you're 3, then the idea of like nurture versus nature, or is this a development? I think that what is what is, and the rest of it, the nurture part is you having to determine how much you're going to allow society to tell you what you're allowed to say, as opposed to you saying what you say, which is against society, and therefore you've become otherized.
Well, you said you knew before you were 5, or by the time you were 5.
Yeah.
Did you know?
I knew at
like,
4.
You knew at 4. Did you know like what it? Did you understand what it was? That
No,
you were,
so
or you
like,
just kind of felt different, like.
Yeah, so for me, I remember, and it's like, yes, that was a young age. People were like, oh, how can you remember? Because you know when you're being pushed, you know as a child like what's traumatizing, and like you remember like those moments. And I remember being in pre-K. I was 4 years old, and they had like we were reading fairy tales or something like that, and all the books that I picked up, it was all like girls who didn't necessarily look like me. They all were white. They all were white, you know, in these storybooks. They all were white, or they all were animals and monsters and things like that. There weren't anybody who looked like me, right? And I remember looking through, and it was all like either a very masculine character and a very feminine character, and they all were like getting together, right? And so I feel like every time we read these stories, like there was like this, ooh, so-and-so has cooties, so-and-so likes this person and likes this person. And it was just like, well, none of the people who it looks like I'm supposed to like, I actually like. And like this girl that I'm constantly sitting next to, like, I actually kind of like her. But I didn't understand them as feelings of like sexualization or feelings of like love or anything like that. Because I'm a child, I don't understand it. But I knew that I wanted to play with her. I knew that I wanted to give her my snacks. I knew that I wanted to.
You knew that you weren't going to go for the prince in that book.
No, I knew I wasn't going to go for the prince. I was going to go for the girl with the luxurious hair, who was really beautiful, who wore these clothes that I really liked, but I didn't particularly want to wear.
But I like that you're wearing them.
Yeah, I was like, they look good on her. And you know, and I wanted to sit next to her on the bus, and it was just like this attraction where I couldn't name it because I'm a child. child, right?
Yeah.
But I knew that I wanted her to have some of my like Jello pudding, and I knew I wanted her to have some.
That's deep.
A little bit of examples.
I want you to have some of my Jello pudding.
Yeah, I knew I wanted to share snack
Don't take my
time.
snack pack.
Yeah, and I knew these things earlier on, and as I got older and I started to understand attraction and love and sex and all these things, I was just like, oh, okay, so these are the things that I want to do and experience with this type of person. And you know, there were also teachers that I had crushes on too, right? I didn't have a crush on my gym teacher, right? I had a crush on like my second grade teacher when she would bend over and help me, and there was a little cleavage going on right there, you know? And we know that like childhood sexuality is real, because we know that as children, when we're in first, second grade, we understand we want to kiss this person on the cheek, right? We want to, we do kind of want to share cooties, right? You know, and we know that we're mean to that person that we like. Yep. And those are the same things I was experiencing, but the person looked like me.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
So I think like for me, I look back on, you know, I have friends who came out later, like, you know, all of these people that were trying to figure it out like as they were growing up, because they, again, like you said, like they weren't having the same experiences as their friends or whatever. And I was like, you know, I'm a white girl from Boston, like just living life, didn't really have to deal with anything like crazy. Like I'm straight, I like men, I'm just, you know, gonna have, everyone's like, when are you gonna get married and have babies? Like that's my struggle. And but then I look back and I'm like, oh, like that sucks that my friend couldn't express himself until he was like 30, right? Or like, you know, and I'm like, I was like blessed, you know, in that sense of like, not because it makes me better, it's just like I didn't
deal with
have
that
to
identity secret.
Yeah, and you know, I didn't know that there was another option, and hopefully, like I didn't know that other people were trying to figure out their shit when you grow up, because you don't know. And I think that's the big issue, is like, it's not like, oh, if I knew that there was an option, like a third option to be gay or to be like, you know, I didn't identify with women or men, it's not like I would be like, oh, now I have a choice. I would just be like, oh, well, maybe so and so. Like,
I think we're almost like having two different conversations here. Like one is sexuality, and the other one is like identification. And I think
we're talking about gender, sexuality, and gender. I mean, they go together, because you can't really identify your sexuality without having an understanding of gender and how people like. I can't say that I'm queer, right? If like I don't understand that the other person may not be the gender that people expect me to be with.
Of course, they're related, but I think like identification and sexuality is complete different. It's like a complete.
So
difference.
you
like,
identify as like
you identify
male
as like sure, like you identify as like you don't identify as male or female, right?
No, I identify as gender non-conforming.
Gender non-conforming. Okay, so identification, like your sexuality, I think are completely different conversations. Like for example, like there's in Facebook, there's like when you sign up for Facebook now, there's like 48 different ways to identify yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
And so like identifying as something and then just being like attracted to another gender, I think is different. Like
they're not as far apart as they are for people, right? Like every single thing we're talking about is relative. It can be. So
yeah, they're related.
If you say, I'm Colton, I'm hetero, I'm white, and I'm privileged, those are how you identify yourself. If someone else says, I'm Joe and I'm from Boston, and that's as far as his identification goes, he has chosen that. Like, so some may put their sexuality in there and some may not.
Oh,
right?
I think what you're saying is that like we're talking about journey and identification, and so we're talking about gender and we're talking about sexuality grouped into the same conversation. But it sounds like what you're saying is that like these are two different journeys. I think for some people they are two different journeys, and then for some people like they go along that same journey together. For me, they were grouped together, because if I were assigned male at birth and I identified as a boy, I would have never had this struggle with like my sexuality, because I've been like, I'm attracted to girls. That's that.
I was assigned male at birth. That was a real last statement.
But it is true. That's because true. They assign, as soon as you are born, you are assigned your gender, regardless of like because like we all hit puberty and we grow into different things, right?
So can I ask
body parts, like what body part you are?
That's a question, like, why do you define yourself as non-gender conforming versus like, you know, just identifying as a male, if that makes sense.
So you know, that's a good question. I don't really feel like I'm a male, right? Like I don't I don't have a I don't have phallus envy, right? I don't want a penis, right? Like, I do enjoy my breasts.
I know, that's also, I like that term.
Yeah, I don't have phallus envy at all. I don't want to have balls. Like, these are things that I don't desire to have, right? I'm very like comfortable in myself and like in the body that I'm given, but I also don't really identify like as necessarily like a woman. I know like the way that like my reproductive system works, right? I know the way that like the way I fit into clothes, the way like what side of the store that like I'm shopping on. I know that like I don't feel comfortable in women's clothes like at all, right? I more so identify like with masculinity, but like still understanding and being comfortable in my body. Like my body and my body parts, I feel look good in like these particular clothes, but these particular clothes don't necessarily align with what I was assigned with at birth. So when I say I'm gender non-conforming, I can't necessarily conform to femininity, but I can't fully conform to masculinity. I'm not going to go through any surgery or anything like that, right? So I'm like right there in the middle.
Yeah.
So then you said you do identify as queer?
Yes.
So then how, like if you identify as non-gender conforming, to be queer, do you have to be, is that like attracted to other non-gender conforming?
No, not necessarily. So me by saying that I'm queer, it's saying that like I'm obviously like not a lesbian, right? I don't identify as a woman and I'm not attracted to specifically other women, right? I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm gay because that has a lot of patriarchy that's like grouped up in it, right? So like when I say that I'm queer in a gender realm, as in like I'm not like this one specific thing. And then with my sexuality, I'm attracted to cis women, I'm attracted to trans women, I'm attracted to masculine women who may identify as gender nonconforming. There's like an array of people that I'm attracted to. So cis, so all of you are cis, right? So cis means that you are cis means same. Right? Okay. So all of you identify with what you were assigned with at birth, correct?
Correct.
So you would all be considered cis.
Oh.
I had no idea.
I had no idea. I thought it was a whole other thing.
Mind blowing, right?
Yeah. I mean, new word. I'm going through. Absolutely new, like new word. I didn't know that.
So it's CIS.
Yeah.
And so like you would be identified as like a cis man, right? Okay. You were assigned boy at birth. These are assumptions that I'm making. If I'm wrong, then like please correct me.
I totally got you.
It's okay.
It is very much okay, especially like this tape.
Yeah. So you were assigned this at birth, and this is something that you identify as, and you haven't altered from at like all in your life, right? Okay. So that's what cis is. So you have cis and you have trans. Trans means like transition, trans, right? Yep. Trans, you understand trans. Yep. And then you have non-binary, which
is not on a spectrum.
So it means you don't. So non-binary means that you don't. So the binary is male, female, masculine, feminine, right? So non-binary meaning you don't fall into either of those categories. You're somewhere on the spectrum, and that's the same thing with gender non-conforming. I'm not conforming to either. I'm just fluid. So sexuality is fluid, right? And so like sexuality is fluid in general, right? Like all of you have had sex probably for a long time, right? Are you attracted to the same people you were attracted to 10 years ago?
No.
Exactly. Sexuality is fluid, right?
Oh my God, I would die.
So that's the thing. Is like you can say that you identify with something. Like you may have been attracted to taller men. You both may have been attracted to skinnier women at some point, right? But that doesn't mean you're attracted to that type of person now, right? Yeah. Because gender is fluid. Because you also dress differently than how you did 10 years ago, right?
You know that's true. You be at school,
so fluid is a new word. I just recently, fluid.
Fluid.
All right,
fluid.
It's all right. I need to get this down because it was introduced to me literally about a week ago, and I said, "No, really?"
Yeah.
And relevance. Like, you understand what I'm saying? Like this is just what comes to. So I needed to. This is a question I needed to answer.
But it's a continuum, right? Like you guys aren't attracted to the same people you were 10 years ago. You don't dress the same. So all of you are also very fluid in your gender as well.
So I'll admit, like, I'll admit I'm a cis woman, which just found that out. But I'll admit when I was growing up, like, Irish Catholic family, grown up, like, real guilt. Like, the guilt
shame,
is
guilt,
real.
Secrets.
And my parents are still together. Like, you know, I had a view of what love and sex and like the world was, and it was this path. Like, you know, there isn't even a lot of biracial families in Boston. Like it was just like, you know, you meet someone down the street, you're gonna get married, it'll be fine. And if we ever heard of like, you know, people in open relationships or anyone who was growing up who like had a little bit different view of sex, I'd be like, you're a psychopath. Like I would just straight up judge and straight up,
but also,
yeah,
I get it.
like closed-minded.
Yeah.
And then
Same.
it wasn't because I was like a bad person, but I just had this very small view. And as I've grown up, I'm like fluid. Like I'm like, all right, like the world can look very different ways and people can be happy in so many different partnerships, environments. Like what works for you doesn't work for me. And that has been the biggest revelation in my life where I'm just like, just because you're choosing a different path or like you...
It doesn't affect you.
It does literally
it has nothing to do with you.
Doesn't affect me.
Right.
So like, I'd be like, you know, you're hooking up with like 4 people at once. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're down this path of like
living your best life.
Yeah, I know. I'm like,
you're like, that's a Tuesday.
Yeah,
so it's fine.
But it's only because I've like met more people that have like are trying something new and are from different neighborhoods. And I'm just like, or different cities, different countries.
But it's
like,
new to you.
So new to me that I'm just like, oh, you seem very happy and put together, and you are in this open relationship, and you're in one of the most loving relationships I've ever seen, and that works.
So
and like,
so do you think like, oh, I can be that now that you're outside of that spectrum?
I think I'm more open to trying things, but I don't think.
Can you chill out?
This is not about me.
Chill out?
This is not about me.
No,
because listen,
you're right.
And it's not to subject you to anything, but you. All right, we would call. I would call that you came from a sheltered lifestyle, seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, versus myself or anybody else at this table seeing so many other different things, and now that you got to experience and you're opening up and you're being able to see this stuff. Are you happy that you are outside of that spectrum now? To see things other than...
Or are you just respecting from afar?
Exactly.
Just now, like as I'm getting older, I think people are expressing themselves more than they did, or I'm just surrounding myself with people that have different views and ways of life. So I think in that way, I'm probably learning a little bit more about it now than I ever have. But yeah, so I think I'm more open to having conversations like that. I haven't been in a situation where like, you know, my partner wants to like have an open relationship or try something that's like totally different, but
like a threesome.
Wild.
Different conversation.
Wild change.
Let's just say I'm more open to those discussions. This is not my Sex and the City documentary, so we'll leave that for later. But
you want some pie?
But having said that, if I had heard when I was like in like, you know, freshman year of high school and someone was like, oh, so and so had a threesome, I would have been like whoa. Like dark path.
That would have been a talk for like
is that because of the way you view family?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's like.
Is that because of the way you view family? Because you express like your upbringing may have been different. Like maybe family structures that you observed growing up. I know family structures that I observed growing up didn't always look like men, woman, children, and that's it in the household. Yeah. Right? So what were your views on like family structure? Because for me, like growing up, there weren't a lot of men around. So seeing 2 women in a household raising children was something I always grew up seeing. So imagining that me being in a partnership or someone who looks like me being in a partnership with another woman, it wasn't too crazy idea.
Interesting.
How, like, at what point does like the oppressor have to like the oppressed have to educate the oppressor on like what is appropriate and what's not? And so that bled into a conversation of like what the N-word means.
You can't say that to me, right? Because that person holds privileges that I don't have and things that I don't have access to. So this word is meaningless, and they are perpetuating what the oppressor has saying by calling me it.
There's a level of intimacy with it that can only be felt among those of likeness. It is not for you. It's one of the only things that's not for you. And
the only thing, really, literally.
Right. Everything else you can say, you can do, you can see, you can touch, you can afford, and this is one thing that you can't.
The whole argument with movements now, like with Black Lives Matter and Me Too, is like equal. It's like equality in distinction.
It's not equality, right? It's equity.
So we just wrapped our convo, and it was excellent. We hope you liked it. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow YouTube, Patreon, Instagram, Facebook, and yes, you'll see this ending a lot because who doesn't love a little consistency, and we wanted to do it one time, so let's do it.